So I was recently watching a video of the Nine Club, a Nine Club episode featuring Ben DeGrosse, and he was talking about YouTube channels and how sometimes they can just get stuck in a pattern of being narcissistic endeavors that don't offer anything to their viewers. So I wanted to just take a moment at the start of this particular shelf tour video to talk about what value I seek to offer with my videos about my book collection and about books in general. Number one, I want to just induce pleasure in the people who just like to consider books and maybe want to see a paperback of a book on a video if they can't get out and buy it. I think anyone who kind of habitually watches my videos would probably be a slightly better informed purchaser of books, because I do say stuff about how I come to the certain conclusions and when I'm buying things, or how I choose to value some books over others, and what I like best about a book during the reading experience in terms of paper weight, typography, front matter, back matter, etc. And so I want to just give pleasure to people who just want to gain data about physical objects, books. Number two, I would love to just survey authors kind of at as much of a breakneck pace as I can on this channel, so that anyone who's subscribed might have a chance to hear about authors they may not have heard of before. And of course, I will talk about authors that people have heard of before, but then there may be some other books that people don't really that are tougher to have found out about, like this guy down here, or this guy here, or just a bunch of other little weird corners that would be difficult to kind of get exposed to otherwise. I want to get people exposed to those. And then I think another thing that I want to try to contribute is an off perspective on books. I want to try to, even if I'm showing a basic book that everyone has heard of before, I'd love to try to use the prompt, the desirable difficulty of the prompt of needing to film about it, to try to say something off about it that might be thought-provoking for someone who is feeling like they don't really know what to think about a book that they have. I'd also like to kind of be a comfort. I mean, I think I'm on purpose 4 or 5 now, but I'd also like to be a comfort to people who sometimes engage very deeply with a book they read, and then other times are more superficially involved. I want to kind of show how both of those can fit into a system of progressing toward actually being better read, and better read for your own purposes. I like to read and collect for the purposes of writing and collaging. I would like to be the best writer I possibly can be later on. And so to that end, I like knowing what raw material I have in front of me, especially since I've been a compulsive book collector, and I like to be able to take stock using this channel as a reason to do that. And I like to take stock specifically for the purpose of knowing what is there to collage from, what influences are there to consider and maybe remind myself are there, what does some new influence that I've just come into contact with first remind me of? How can I tie that into the network of other things that I've superficially or deeply talked about on this channel? From the purposes of how do I write with this knowledge? What does this make me want to do in terms of novel construction or something? So for all those purposes, I make these videos, and I try to make them entertaining, and I try to enunciate clearly, and I also, I try to just entertain myself at the end of the day too. So I wanted to talk about this shelf because this is just a good looking shelf and it has lots of good material on it. First up, we have Snow by Orhan Pamuk. The first time I encountered this book was when I was in high school. I liked it. It was one of the first kind of romance style books that I'd read that had a romantic plot to it. And I liked that it featured a writer. I liked that it featured a poet. I liked how the narrators, or the main character's poems, were worked into the fabric of the text. I was reading in a hardcover copy of the book that I checked out of the Knoxville Public Library. And then it turns out that in the scheme of things, in Knoxville, if you happen to be there, McKay's pricing system will be kind of wonky, and certain books will just forever be 25 cents because they happen to be a difficult thing that was purchased a lot at some point in time and then was probably very widely given back to secondhand stores. Snow, a book I enjoy or enjoyed on first read, happened to be one of those books, so I thought I would just add it to my collection. This is probably one of the ones that I have the greatest distance between the first read and now. I was just in high school when I first read it, and I appreciated how readable it was and how suspenseful it was. This is certainly a book that I think I could learn a lot from were I to go back to it. And it's got length, but it reads very quickly. I mean, it's got like approximately 400 pages, but it reads like a breeze. Is it common for people to recommend this one? I feel like I don't usually see this one recommended when it comes to Pomix books, and I think I most often see My Name is Red talked about as the book to recommend, but maybe I'm wrong about that. Of course, I'm not really in a circle where people are talking about this writer that much, even though he's someone who has won the Nobel Prize. Here's my 33 1/3 book on Flood. I have a video about this book if you're interested. This marked, I think reading this for me marked a period, the start of a period of more seriously engaging with these 33 1/3 books. It was good to read one of these and respond positively and negatively. It made me feel like I was kind of alive as a musician. One thing I will say about this is at the time when I read this, I wasn't as familiar with Flood as I was with my other favorite They Might Be Giants albums, which are the first and second, the Pink album and Lincoln. And then outside of that, I really love The Spine, even though I'm not really that familiar with that one, and I really like Join Us, and I'm a big fan of I Like Fun. This is a copy of Coraline. It's the second copy of Coraline in the house, but it's a copy of Coraline that is signed by Neil Gaiman. So it has this drawing in the front of a little mouse, and it is inscribed to some girl who probably brought this up to Neil. And it's really nice, and I haven't had the heart to give it away. Coraline is the only book by Neil Gaiman that I've read in full, and I really appreciate it. I think that this book has worth outside of just the realm of children's literature as a very briskly and leanly portrayed imaginative landscape. I think its depiction of like ambiguous good and bad figures, voids, points of no return, small passageways are really great. Not sure if I was coherent there. Here's a book, Nowhere Man. I'm still not sure exactly how I feel about this book, so I'm not going to belabor the point here, but it's one of those books I read and made a lot of marks in. I liked its intersection with Beatles lore. Yeah, it's a kid who spends his adolescence trying to become Bosnia's answer to John Lennon. At first blush, I feel like when I get back to this, it's going to kind of clash in my mind with images from Leningrad Cowboys' Go America, which is not at all, similar in terms of like geography, except that it happens to be like a European country that's somewhat remote to most Americans, I would say. One thing I will say is if you're a viewer in Chicago, or if you happen to be going through Chicago, I think this Alexander Hemon is more on the radar in Chicago. I think he's been a professor in Chicago, and like Stuart Dybek, he's one of those authors that you get almost forcefully exposed to if you're living in Chicago or studying in Chicago. Wow, the chaos of these shelves is is just astronomical. Off the charts. The Collected Poems of Chika Sagawa, translated by Sawako Nakayasu. This same translation of this, I think the same exact group of poems, was later picked up and published by, I think, like Modern Library or something. And this is the kind of first edition of it that came out on Canarium Books, which is a really lovely poem press that I was talking about purposes of this channel. One purpose I would like to achieve is just broadcasting to at least the couple dozen people who will see these videos, at least in part. I want to broadcast to them how good Canarium Books is. It publishes great translations like this, great works of new poetry by people like Anthony Madrid, Anthony Robinson, you know, the list goes on. Anthony Madrid, I already said, Kit Schluter, Anne Kawala. This was a cool get at the, if your library, if your bookstore has a like small press section, look out for Ugly Duckling Press. I think they're probably one of the presses that was affected by the recent close of small press distribution. This is part of a series, I think they have, of reprinting old texts, lost literature series. And this is part of that, and it's a book that I had to get because in, where's the book down here? Other Traditions by Ashbery, which if you're watching, you should know that the Pen Sound Ashbery audio collection contains audio of him reading those lectures. So please consider that. But there is a lecture in here on Laura writing. Encountering that made me more excited to read this. My first impressions were that it was like written perfectly for what I wanted in terms of simplicity and solidity and concreteness and abstraction, the perfect kind of mix of those things, the engine that creates once all those physical properties are in place and organized and aligned. And then I also liked the prose thing at the back. There's an essay in the back. This essay, A Prophecy or a Plea, the most moving and at once distressing event in the life of a human being is his discovery that he is alive. This whole essay beginning here was, is a really, you know, this is a pretty impactful bit if you can read it aloud or read it closely. I think it shakes you up. I'd like to read it again to know more what I think about it, but this is a very, very beautifully made book, and I can recommend, I'll recommend this whole series, and I'll especially recommend this this reissue of The Closed Chaplet. It's obviously not The Closed Chaplet, it's The Close Chaplet. This is a book of Tolstoy that I found in a little free library that I think I might try to get rid of because I'd like a better edition of these things. I'd like that book. You know that series of like the great short works of so-and-so? I think there's like a trade paperback of that for Tolstoy that I would prefer to read these in over this Signet. Nothing against Signet. Something that's interesting. I do have a friend named Illich who's named after this character. Here's a book that might get you started writing. It has a really lovely, disturbing section that takes place via correspondence that I think might be the thing that sticks with me most here. That and the insights into what it's like to read Ashbery if you're just trying to like kind of milk the fact of his career and the state of poems in something like The Tennis Court Oath for inspiration. Like those parts are all pretty memorable. This is a book I enjoy. I think I enjoy this more than the average reader. I think I'm probably in the 80th percentile of people who enjoy this book, at least. Maybe the 90th or 95th percentile. I'm up there, I think, in terms of enjoying, not understanding, but enjoying. But I think what's nice about books like this is that they leave in rough edges to emphasize that there's kind of a little world, a little chaotic world there with bits to understand in the reader's way, but not like a cohesive statement to take away, you know? And that's always, for me, for this reader, a comforting experience. We have a book of George Oppin's selected poems. I don't really know that much about him. I know that typically so far in my life, I've enjoyed reading him a little bit more than I've enjoyed reading Robert Creeley. I think he's on the shelf kind of close to Ben Lerner because I know that he's mentioned by Ben Lerner a lot as an example of a kind of poet who goes away from poetry and then comes back to it. As of today, my biggest thought when seeing this book is that I want to get Mary Oppin's book, Mary Oppin's book of memoir, and read that, maybe even before pressing onward with these selected poems. I'm glad to have this book, though. This was one of those lucky finds where it was just cheap and I knew I wanted to have him around. So I bought the book. Here we have two New Directions poem books. This is Irving Layton, Not to Everyone's Taste. This was something I bought in high school, actually. It's been in my library forever. And I kept it around because it doesn't take up much space. And because I kind of figured at some point or other, I would get around to like to being able to take some lessons from it. And I think these days I've got the ability to take stuff from this collection. I took it to work one day recently, and I read this kind of, I think the poem was like kind of more sexual or something, and I was like, yeah, this would have totally made me upset as a high schooler. And now it's insouciance, and it's kind of the kind of plotting of it works for me now. This is a book that incited strong feelings among my compatriots in college, so much so that I felt like I needed to keep a copy of it in my collection. Like anything that makes people hate it that much, I kind of need to keep it around. Not that people were hating it. I was just reading poems from it aloud, and people were objecting. I think this book has its merit. I think it's one of those things that can just kind of get you going. I guess if you've bought a notebook and you just want to start filling it. And I'm underestimating this book. Without looking back into it, I think the second half of it is the half I like better, where the sections aren't numbered, and I think they're titled. Yeah. We have Bleak House on this extremely chaotic shelf. This is one of the first books I bought at Seminary Co-op in Chicago. It's one of my favorite bookstores, and one of the best bookstores I've ever had the privilege of browsing in or shopping at, let alone being a member of. It's a heavy edition with kind of like thin pages, and it contains a lot of illustrations, which are highly valuable, I think. If you just have the book in your library and you kind of want to just, take peeps. I bought this on a David Mitchell recommendation, I think. I think his insistence and also the cheapness of the book, I think it was only $10, yeah, or thereabouts. That was cheap, I thought, at the time, for such a large, substantial classic book, and I still kind of think that. It's cool that it has an introduction by Mary Gateskill. Unfortunately, I've only read the first 60 pages of this. I know that's kind of crazy, but something I'd like to dwell on today is that it's a book written in multiple perspectives. I think it was kind of a inventive book in that sense. Some of it is in first person and some of it isn't. If you didn't know that about Bleak House, well, now you know it. Condensed novels by Bret Harte. I look forward to reading these soon. I've never really read Bret Harte, and when I read this, I'd like to make a video about it. But it's kind of like the opera book. I think it's stuff that's written in a particular way that would be really, really fun to pastiche, especially if it leads to you like adopting a voice that might be really useful in somewhat efficiently making stories to delight and amaze your friends. I haven't read Persuasion, but I've loaned this copy out, and people who've read it have really enjoyed it. Scholars of the novel that I've heard talk have said that their favorite Jane Austen is Persuasion. Others have said Mansfield Park. My personal plan is to start with Sense and Sensibility when I get back into Jane Austen. Along the lines of recommending writers to you who you may not have heard before, this is Chelsea Minnis. This is her book Poemland. I think I've heard it said that Poemland is even better than Baby I Don't Care, which is the book that followed this. This is a kind of cool because it's an early Wave Books edition. It's like, not all Wave Books tend to look like this anymore. They have that raw paper look. And each section is divided by a reproduction of this of the barcode on this black paper. It's nice, and it's kind of its time. It's like that Habitations of the Word that we were talking about earlier. That if that's kind of a design time capsule, this is another kind of design time capsule. This book is really, really for fans of old film, like noir film, colloquialisms in old noir movies, and also people who like the Tennis Court Oath. The Folio Society 4 quartets. Doesn't really need much discussion. Would you like me to take that out of its slipcase? I have the sense that anyone who watches these just for kind of the pleasure of browsing books while from the comfort of your YouTube screen will probably want me to take this out of its slipcase. So here you go, kind of like the Amy Lowell book pasted on, title on the spine and on the front there. Something torn out of the front. I found this on clearance somewhere. Someone had just gotten rid of it for, I don't know why. Maybe they were scared of it or something. This is a part of the poem that I memorized a while back. Garlic and sapphires in the mud clot the budded axle tree. The trilling wire in the blood sings below inveterate scars, appeasing long-forgotten wars. The dance along the artery, the circulation of the lymph, are figured in the drift of stars. Ascend to summer in the tree, we move above the moving tree, and light upon the figured leaf, and here upon the sodden floor below, the boarhound and the boar pursue their pattern as before, but reconciled among the stars. I think that's pretty amazing. I think it's really tough to argue with that. I love that. I should re-memorize that and re-slipcase this. I kind of just have fun looking through all these books, through all the chaos. It's just sort of, it's just kind of cool to like be like, oh no, what will we think of next? Okay, on sale May 2018, Motherhood by Sheila Heti. So this is a proof. I had a hardcover of the book that I loaned out to somebody. View with a Grain of Sand, a collection of poems that I think is actually kind of great. Many people, I think I got this because I was on the Wikipedia page for Nobel Prize winners. There's a great one in here about a Yeti. Calling Out to Yeti. Notes from a non-existent Himalayan expedition. Yeti, we've got Shakespeare there. Yeti, we play solitaire and violin. At nightfall, we turn lights on, Yeti. So that's kind of great. Tea Room Trade introduced me to the idea of the ethnography. I kept it in my library. I think it's like one of the coolest things I ever encountered in college. Holy moly, there's something tucked back here. And it's Ethan Frome. How that got back there, I don't know. This one I read and don't remember very well. But it's an Edith Wharton I'd like to revisit. I don't think I maybe understood the social stakes involved with the like sexual politics and stuff when I first read it. De Profundis, I think the kind of the slight unattractiveness of these giant big blocks of text have like kept me from reading this as soon as I should. The Law Code of Manu is a book that I kind of, I'll often be like, hey, should I give this away? And people will say no. Banana by, Lizard by Banana Yoshimoto. I've never read a book of hers, but I have friends who I respect as poets who really like her work. This is another book that I try to get rid of, and people are like, no, don't. Maybe this move will be the time. Travels with My Aunt by Graham Greene. This one is maybe the Graham Greene I'm most excited to read next, along with The Power and the Glory. Those are like the two Graham Greenes that I think are going to really like rock my world in the way that The End of the Affair did. This is a total, and here we have a total classic, Fleur Jaegie's These Possible Lives, in this small New Directions paperback. This is a little perfect book of 3 essays on these writers, and it will probably change the way you read old articles and the way you commonplace, maybe. This is the copy of The Betrothed that I got with a recent Barnes & Noble gift card that I was given. It was supposed to be the next big book I bought with a Barnes & Noble gift card and read after Crime and Punishment. Winesburg, Ohio. This is another book kind of like Ethan Frome that I didn't really understand the stakes of when I first read it. It kind of went under the radar. I didn't understand what was happening like underneath the lines. But I think I've shown myself in recent reads of Hemingway that like I'm capable of doing that now. Like I'm capable of kind of guessing when people are alone or about to be ostracized or behaving like total outcasts, even when they're just like filling up their tea kettle or something. And I think you need some kind of that ability to infer, some kind of that wisdom to be able to read and appreciate Winesburg, Ohio. People who are able to like read and really enjoy this book in high school, I salute you. Totally just bought this one for the cover at a bookstore in Brooklyn. It got a little roughed up because it was on the floor of the van while I continued along on tour. Paul Rand is the cover designer, that great cover designer. So then next, there is this book of Raymond Roussel stories, published by The Song Cave, another great small press, distributed by Small Press Distribution, I think. The Song Cave has all these, it publishes old stuff and contemporary stuff. I wonder if this is a new translation. But yeah, Raymond Roussel is another writer. It's interesting, I have Laura Riding on this shelf, and then I also have Roussel, two writers who are featured in other traditions. This is a kind of a thinner book than my other Roussel book, Locus Solus, which I haven't finished a read of. I've only read the first, I would say, third of it, third to a half of that book. There's a giant, really long section in the middle that I wanted to read aloud with somebody, and I'm waiting for a chance to read aloud. You know, the Song Cave books have this cool texture, another thing in their favor. They're all designed really well. They publish really relevant and exciting books. Highly recommend the Song Cave if you're book shopping soon. If you happen to not be moving and you happen to be in a period of rapid book acquisition, check out the Song Cave. A Great American Novel by Philip Roth in a book club edition. This one's funny and zany. This one will really get you going. I've only read the first chapter, but I've read the first chapter a couple of times, and that way it is kind of like it's the book that it wants to be a parody of a lot of the time, Moby Dick. I feel like Philip Roth really knows how to start out books. We've got both Flesh and Knot. It's the one that has the little sheets containing dictionary definitions between the pieces. Is there one of those? Yeah, that contains these spreads. From David Foster Wallace's own kind of list of definitions of words. This one has a real glue smell to it. I think in here there's a lot that I haven't read. There's 5 direly underappreciated U.S. novels after 1960, which is the source of the Wittgenstein's Mistress recommendation that got me getting that book. Oh wait, or maybe this is it. Well, I think it's in both of those pieces. And then I really liked the thing about, isn't there a thing about the prose poem in here? The best of the prose poem I like very much. Yeah. And here's a book that's out of print. It's out of stock and a reprint has not been scheduled. Writings 1932 to 1946 by Gertrude Stein. It contains stanzas in meditation, lectures in America, the geographical history of America, Ida, Brucey and Willie, and other works. And those other works are really cool, like this piece on Henry James, the piece on Picasso that I have in a standalone that you might see later. It has some plays. It has this reflection on the atomic bomb. What does she see when she shuts her eyes? Sounds cool. It's just such a cool, badass variety in these Gertrude Stein books. And any fan of Ashbery should really branch out and read her and consider her sentences in the way that William Gass does. Or at least that's what I think. That's my unlettered opinion. Yeah, I really lucked out getting this slipcased edition. Although I wouldn't think that this would be really too expensive to get, because I bet everybody gave it back or wants to get rid of it because the appetite for Gertrude Stein is not a very huge one. It's a kind of a niche. But yeah, I lucked out in getting this. I don't really remember where I got it from. Then we have a copy of Hopscotch by Julio Cortázar, not mine. I've read probably 70 cumulative pages of this book, and I've really loved them. We've got Bark by Lori Moore. It's signed in the way where there's a leaf that she signs and they stick in. I've read this whole book once. I reread the first story, Debarking. Is that the first story again? Is that the first story? Am I right about that? Can I get some? Oh, yes. Debarking is the first story in there. Debarking really holds up. I think it's evidence of how Lori Moore's stories, her work gets more suspenseful, I think, over the years. I think she learns better and better how to build suspense. That's a thesis. Very rare Penguin hardcover edition of the uniform hardcover edition of Vladimir Nabokov's works. A lot of these were on sale at Powell's at one point, and I'm kind of kicking myself that I didn't buy more of them because they're somewhat hard to come by now. But this is one that was given to me as a gift. It has the Lolita screenplay and The Tragedy of Mr. Morn, which is that hardcover. It's that play that they found and then published in 2012 or something. It's just kind of a weird Nabokov book, which I'm in the market for because I collect them. Of course, I have a book that's one of the books that people have watched most on this channel, which is my video about my Nabokov collection. Hey, This is cool. I wasn't thinking of this as something that would belong in my plays collection. I should really shelve this with plays. That reminds me. Under the Glacier, maybe a nice detour for someone who tried to read Independent People and couldn't get past page 120. This is a book I should definitely get rid of. It's just like a brochure for the New York Public Library. It's not even, doesn't even have a price on it. It's free. I wonder if this will be collectible someday. I know it has like Vampire Weekend in it. It's really like a photo book of people standing by objects they like. To harken back to the beginning of this video, here's Orhan Pamuk standing with Voyage pittoresque de Constantinople et des rives de Bosphore by Antoine Ignace Melling. Anyway, that's that shelf. If I can get to them, it would be really nice to get to the next two because we have this Ashbury hideout and some other assorted stuff that's cool. And then we have my Nicholson Baker collection down here. So the next two shelves should be really like much more interesting than other shelves and more cohesive in terms of thematic, in terms of authors discussed. Of course, every other book in my library is an Ashbury book or a book that was brought to me by considering something Ashbury said or wrote or something. So I hope you all enjoyed this shelf tour, and don't know how many more there's going to be, but if you're watching this, thank you. Have a good day. Happy reading.